Hey guys, OGalbina here, and it is time for the 2023 Draft League Hot Takes video. I did a video like this last year, and it was a ton of fun. I love reading through the very unhinged and funny takes that a lot of people have when it comes to Draft League, and, you know, talking about whether I agree with them, whether I don't. Some of them are a little bit more lukewarm, I won't lie to you, and some of them are like, be nice when you play Pokemon. At least in the last one there were, but some of them you're like, ooh, you relax. But regardless, these are a lot of fun to make, and I'm definitely excited to do this one. We have even more responses this time. 64 replies. This is going to be a long one. Excuse me if I'm sniffling it all throughout. I know that annoys some people, but I'm a little stuffed up. It's, you know, weather changing here. It's cold. It's early in the morning, so I got my coffee. I'm going to have to take breaks to drink drinks and things like that, because I'm going to be talking a lot, obviously, so forgive me if I do so. But yeah, if you guys do enjoy this video today, be sure to drop a like as well as sub to the channel. We're on our way to 3,000 subs, and if everybody who watches today drops a sub, we should actually hit it today, which would be really, really cool. And I would appreciate a ton. Drop a comment too, whether it be your Draft League hot take if you didn't get a chance to comment on the thread, or if it's something that you thought was interesting from the thread, or something you major disagree with. Again, remember to be respectful in the comments. You know, this is meant to be fun. It's not meant to be mean to people and, you know, psycho and stuff like that. But yeah, that being said, let's go and jump on to the first one. It looks like it is Danny saying Chimecho is a top tier Terra captain. I won't take no for an answer. I don't think this is like a super hot take. Yeah, I don't think this is a super hot take. I mean, especially in like low tier Terra for like a low tier Pokemon, it's really not all too bad when it comes to that. I think it's mostly that like levitate ability, as well as being able to turn into like a fairy typing and things like that. Lets you like super wall things like Great Tusk, which is actually incredibly funny. Actually, I don't know how much Heavy Slam does, but you're at least taking on the stabs of a ton of Pokemon. You have incredible utility. You're one of the 2 lines that can perform a clerical role in the game with Heal Bell. But you can also be Cosmic Power. You can also run like the cool Charge Beam set, so you can Calm Mind. You can do a lot of really fun things you can wish. I like Chimecho in general as like a 1-2 point Pokemon, so like anything you can Terra makes it better. And especially a Pokemon with a lot of utility like Chimecho. Then we have Pokemon here saying not too hot, but anything over an 8-week regular season is way too long for the coaches. I definitely agree. It's really funny because like nowadays, if you like talk to like new age Draft League players, people start playing in Gen 8, Gen 9, it seems like that's the norm. But back in the day, back in Gen 6 before I even started playing, but especially back in Gen 7 when I started playing, the norm was 12 weeks. Not even 10. The norm was 12 weeks. We played in seasons for a third of the year. That's crazy to me now, because I couldn't imagine playing in a 12-week league. I mean, leagues don't even go 12 weeks with league plus playoffs now. Like, if you win the whole thing. So I think it's obviously a little bit too much. I mean, imagine it from this perspective, right? Say you're just having a tough season. You drafted a shitty team. You're having a tough time that season. And by week 7, you know you're not making playoffs because you're 1-7. I gotta stick it out for another month and a week? No, I'm not even making playoffs. It sucks. Like, it's just terrible. So you'd have a lot more drops back in Gen 7, I feel like you do in Gen 8, because now it's like, okay, it's week 6. I can't make playoffs. I got 2 more weeks. So tough it out. Play the game real quick and be on my way. So I definitely think that's good that this is the norm now, because it was not for the first 2-3 years I played. So definitely a good change that Draft League has made as a whole. Next up, we have Obo saying kind of the opposite of what a lot of people have said in this thread, to be honest. Terra is a fun gimmick, and up there with Megas is the best gimmick Pokemon to introduce. Also, Landoi is a bad Pokemon. The first one is a terrible take. I hate Terra. I know that you guys who have been, you know, around the channel and you maybe talk to me on Discord and things like that, you know that I despise Terra as a mechanic. I would actually prefer that we did not play with it. Gen 8 was my favorite Draft League meta, like balance-wise, and I think part of the reason it was so balanced is because there was no gimmicks. And I know it's fun for a lot of people to have the gimmick and stuff like that, and I do understand that, and I think that it is valid. But I think objectively, competitively, Terra is awful. And especially in a counter team format, it gets so fucky, and I don't enjoy it. I'm excited for the times where it's finally acceptable to ban Terra in leagues. I would love to play in a no Terra Wi-Fi league. We almost did it for BBR this season. We didn't because nobody wanted it. But I think it'll be the case eventually. And yeah, I don't like Terra though. Then we have Trexo here saying, it's never my fault if I lose, and when I win, it's because I played amazing. That's true. I mean, very, very cold take, very freezing take. I'm shivering. It's very cold because that's the case. You know, when we lose as a Draft League player, it's because we got hacked, because my opponent's bad, or because I was sick or something like that. You know, my dogs were barking in the background. It's never like one reason, you know what I mean? So Trexo's on to something there. I think he's right. Oh, and I forgot to mention Landoi is a bad Pokemon. I don't think Lando's bad. Right? I think it's just much worse, and I think it's kind of very much so overhyped because we think of the Landorus from Gen 7 and 8, where in Gen 7 it was typically banned, in Gen 8 it was a top 5 Pokemon, now I wouldn't take it in round 1. You know, it's like an early round 2 mon to me. And the main reason for that, which obviously I'm not super elaborating on, but the main reason for that is it losing access to rock polish, because that 101 speed tier is very mediocre this generation when it comes to winning, right? You can still function offensively. It's not like slow, but you're not winning games with 101 base speed. And the way Lando would circumvent that in the past was obviously rock polishing, and rock polish 3 attacks was a great endgame win con, and now it can't do that anymore. It can nasty plot and function as like an incredible breaker, but it's never going to sweep anymore, and I think that really takes a giant facet in a Lando I's game, so that's why I don't like it very much. So I agree that it's like not great, or it's worse than people think it is. I don't think it's bad though. I definitely think it's very strong, an incredibly strong Pokemon actually. Alright, next up we have Skyrander here saying weather sweepers are really good if used more than just a sweeper. I feel like oftentimes their defensive utilities are overlooked and not as much the reason they were drafting. Like Victory running Strength Step or Ludicolo running Rain Dish. The only issue, right, is that those Pokemon defensively are not very bulky. You know, they're not the bulkiest Pokemon in the world, so like, while they do have defensive aspects and utility that they can run, it's not great. Like on Ludicolo, I'd probably rather run Swift Swim like sub Leech Seed if I'm going to be an annoying defensive Ludicolo, so I can at least be faster than things in rain and be a big nuisance in that way, right? Opposed to like Rain Dish and getting the extra leftovers. I don't know. That's just me. Not the best defensively. I think Excadrill is used defensively very well as like a pivot. I've seen a lot of Assault Vest Excadrills. Just the ground steel typing is incredible. I mean, I'm sure you see it on this generation with Iron Treads. Very good typing defensively. You resist a ton of things naturally, and when invested properly, can be very solid as check to a lot of things. Like, I mean, Excadrill is one of the best Coco checks in the game. Like, so like that's obviously a great way of showing that, hey, this Pokemon's still very good, right? Then we have Lars here saying, people have become way too greedy in terms of setup with Mons lately. During my last few games, people literally just swim setup turn 1 in the game and called it Hyper Offense. Hyper Offense is a playstyle you need to learn first, and not click turn 1 setup. Okay, I don't know if I agree with the second part. I don't know particularly what that's trying to say. That seems like it's just a player thing, like whoever you're playing against has like kind of decided to start setting up turn 1, and there are some Hyper Offense playstyles that do immediately spam setup. Like setup spam is definitely a very viable option in this generation. I do think that like setup has gone a little bit crazy this gen, in the sense that like people really like to do it. I mean, there's a couple people I've seen that'll bring like 4 setup mons to a game and just kind of hope one of them wins. Whereas like it'll definitely work sometimes, and there's some teams you can totally overwhelm with it. I think a lot of time people kind of underestimate like the ability to run like just an Encore. You know, Encore is my favorite move in the game. I think someone put this later on the thread. Encore is like the best move in the game in Gen 9, like by far. I run Encore on so many things. I'm sure you guys have seen the GBU. I mean, I guess it's kind of a spoiler for next week, but my next game against Amel, I ran double Encore. I ran Encore DNC, Encore Bundle. I think I've done that multiple times throughout the season. Whenever I brought DNC, I've run Encore on it. And I bring it most of the time as a 4th move on Bundle, because it's very valuable to be able to lock your opponent in disadvantageous positions and stop setup potentially. Something I've actually seen a rise of more this generation is actually Mental Herb for specifically Encore. The amount of times I've seen someone bring Mental Herb on their mon, their setup mod when Screen Tail exists is pretty crazy. Like, I saw it a ton this generation, so I think there's the metagame's kind of changing to pivot to be more hyper offensive, and so that means a lot more setup. And I think that's also partly due to the fact, 1, power creep, but also Terra being terrible. Next up, we have Dell here saying, if you don't watch your games back and think in hindsight about your prep and the plays you made objectively, you will not improve as a player. You're not trying to actively improve. No one wakes up one day is just good. You can't expect to be better either. I actually totally agree. That's one thing I always do. I mean, not immediately after, right? Say I get my ass beat, right? I'm probably not going to go back and watch my game after and be like, and write down the notes, but I'm going to cool off, because I do definitely get upset when I lose. It's just a matter of fact. I'm going to cool off later that night or the next day. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to watch the game a couple times and be like, okay, oh, why the hell did you do that? Turn 7. Like, that was a terrible play. You're overplaying here. You shouldn't have made this double. You didn't need to make this play. You should have made this play at this point. And you can kind of recognize that for future instances where you might want to make that play. You might almost make that mistake, and then you're like, wait a minute. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't do that. So I definitely think this is true. Or having friends watch your games, or like having friends who are willing to be like, hey, this is why you lost, you know? And I think it's important to have friends like that. Like, I know if I make a shitty play in like Goons, someone like Dell or someone like Ant or Kurt is gonna be like, I don't know about that, brother. That was tough. And then, you know, obviously I can go, yeah, you're probably right. Next up, I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'll scroll through it so it's in the video. This is L5 posting a copy pasta about, I don't know who did this. It said Oliver or Port. So I'm wondering if it's Oliver or it's a giant copy pasta about why people are hypocrites for saying Pult is top 3 and Spec is not. Which obviously, as someone who doesn't like Spec, disagrees heavy. Now Spec is obviously better this generation. Spec is definitely like a top 10 mon. Top 10, top 15. But two fast ghost types don't really work out equivalently, to be completely honest. But it's definitely an interesting one. I think that's the only major thread we have. Alright, next up we have a TTM, and based on who wrote this, I'm like 99% sure this is Styx. For those of you like, haven't been around for a while, TTM was, a big prevalent figure in the draft community for a while. They had 3 members, and Styx was one of them, and he drafted Trick Room a lot. And he said, Trick Room with momentum is best playstyle in draft. I will die on this hill. I think you're going to be dying on the hill alone. That is a rough one. I don't know if I quite agree with that. The problem with Trick Room is just the inability of like being able to take advantage of your turns. It's the same reason that Tailwind is very bad in singles, in my opinion. It's the same reason I won't run Tailwind. I think Trick Room is a little bit better because the Pokemon that are going to thrive under Trick Room are typically very fat and annoying and can find multiple opportunities. And there are great Trick Room setters. Things like the Slow Kings are great at setting it up. They do miss teleport immensely. They really, really miss teleport. But again, not the end of the world. But the only issue, like I said, is that you're not getting a lot of turns because you're Trick Rooming, you're momentuming out. 1, 2, 3. It's not too hard. And especially in a counter team format where I know that Trick Room is a potential playstyle of you. If I see you have Ursaluna, the Slow King, I kind of know that that's a mode you can go, and I'm going to prep accordingly. I'm going to be able to pivot around dual stabs. I'm going to be able to protect. I'm going to be able to stall these turns. And yeah, it's not great, in my opinion. So I'm not a big Trick Room guy. I think Styx might be dying alone on that hill. Next up, we have Lars again saying Bundle and Chiyu always have the worst matchup when I use them. When my opponent has them, they say I have a god tier matchup. I hate them with a passion. They are absolutely ass. That seemed personal. Now, I haven't actually used Chiyu in draft yet, which is another mod on my list that I want to try. But I do really, really agree with the bundle aspect, because obviously I have it in GBU. Now, it has been doing better lately, so I have to give credit where credit's due, right? It has been for sure doing better. But the perfect example of this is I'll have matchups in GBU, like by week 1 against Lars, where I put like Empoleon and like all these crazy and Max Spidef Lamora that lives a hit because bundle's ass, right? And I'll have a terrible matchup with bundle. But like Seabad in PPL, I've been obviously like doing the analyst work for that and watching the games. He has never had a bad bundle matchup. It goes crazy in every single matchup in that. Like, I don't know what my luck is, and maybe I'm sharing it with Lars because that's my boy. But dude, I just don't have those matchups. But then I see everybody else use them. Like, dude, freeze dry, hydro pump, freeze dry, hydro pump. Everything's dead in one. You just get up a spike and you win the game, right? But I haven't seemed to have those, so we'll see. Next up, we have Kelly under the radar saying Draft League peaked in Usum. After that, everything was ruined by Nat decks, unusable gimmicks, and non-debatable top 10 picks that pigeonhole a lot of teams to look alike after 2 seasons in a generation. And then there's one more reply under. To add on, the timer didn't kill the format, the above things did. The timer just took everyone's eyes away from the above mentioned things. So I'll give and take. I do agree that Draft League peaked in Usum. At least like format, play-wise. But I also think that it's because I have big old nostalgia goggles on, if you can see them. That's when I started playing. That's when I started uploading, and I had 50 subs, and I was doing it for fun, and I was having Panther and Lantern Joe and Mid record my replays because I didn't have any means of recording myself. It was back when I first started playing, and when there was all the big YouTubers were playing in draft leagues, and the WB was happening, and NPA, and PG, P4G, and like there were so many big YouTube leagues. Now it's like the small draft league community, and then there's like SPL, which is like the Joey League, and that's like the new WB is like kind of how I see it. But before, there was big leagues everywhere, and there was also small leagues like the ones that I'm playing in now. It was a really cool time to be a draft player, and I thought it was a lot of fun. Got to still use Megas on Wi-Fi, which is fun. I don't think Z moves were very oppressive. I think it was a very fun mechanic. But then Gen 8 happened. We got a very unusable mechanic, which I do agree on usable gimmicks. I hate Terra, and I hate Dynamax even more. And then it has become a very power-crept game, right? Non-debatable top 10 picks. I'd say non-debatable top 5 picks. I think once you get out of the top 5, you can for sure kind of say, I want to try this one. I think this one's pretty close to as good as this. I think that's a little bit better. But yeah, I don't know. I'm also not someone who gets super upset with that particular part, teams looking similar, because they'll never look the same, especially when you get down to bottom tiers. You'll see people's preferences and likes and wants peeking through. And I'm fine with like kind of boring, you know, set metas. But I do hard to disagree on the timer killing the format. I get not liking metagames in particular, and maybe you stop playing. But I think, as we can see right now, the format is in a better place than it has ever been right now. It is such a good time to be a draft fan. And I'm sure the way I feel about Usum, so many of you feel right now about Scarlet and Violet, because people have come back and people are playing the format again. It's being publicized on YouTube, and like leagues are popping up. The amount of people I've seen starting their first leagues now it's already surpassed the 3 years of Generation 8. Like, by far. Like, I think it's doubled the amount of new people playing, and it's only been like a year into the generation. Like, it's actually pretty insane how well Draft is doing right now, and I think a big part of that is just the timer coming back. I really do think that is a big aspect of it, and the fact that timer is back is really kind of saved the game. So I don't agree about the timer thing. I do agree that Usum was dope though, and I do miss Usum. Okay, oh, we gotta go back up. Ooh, there we go. We have one more from Dell here, saying the healthier you are, the better player you are, mentally/physically. You need to take care of yourself to play better. You think worse when you're dehydrated, hungry, upset, anxious. Everything you don't do to limit outside factors from your game is negatively affecting you. I think this is fair. And I think Dell is like kind of taking this from the perspective of an athlete, because I know Dell played a ton of, you know, sports growing up. And I did as well. For those of you who don't know, I played baseball through my freshman year of college. I actually didn't start playing competitive mons until like I stopped playing ball, because I needed that competitive outlet because I was so bored. But there's like an old baseball saying, or at least, you know, that I used to hear a lot when I was younger. It was, you got to look good to play good. So it was making sure, you know, you felt confident. You were wearing, you know, your cool gear, you were wearing your stirrups, and you had eye black on for no reason on a cloudy day that you were playing, but it looked cool. You felt cool. You had a moxie to you. You had a swagger. You felt confident and you did well. And then obviously being sick, dehydrated, unhealthy, things like that, not feeling good, it's going to affect you because it's affecting your mental, you know? And it's definitely true. I mean, obviously I've had some tough times over the last few years, and I feel like it definitely directly correlates in how I play and how frustrating I end up getting and things like that. And I'm sure Dell can attest to that as well. So I think it's very important to make sure you're taking care of yourself and making sure that you're also not stressed out playing. You know, this is as serious as, and again, this is Rich coming from me, a guy who takes it way too serious, but it's very important to make sure that this is fun, right? And it's a game, and you should be enjoying it. I think someone replied to it. I think it's Onesie here. He said, "This is legitimately the best piece of advice I can give anyone. You won't play well if you don't feel well. If you have an ink and drink, exercise a little, clean your teeth, face, make yourself presentable, you won't be at your best." For big games, I legit put on a suit and tie. I think that's sick, dude. Like, I think that's definitely really, really cool. Because again, you feel good. Like, you're feeling confident. You're like, I'm putting on the fucking suit and tie. Maybe that's why Mountai's the GOAT. Because bro pulls up in the suit and tie for every game, you know, and he's probably the best player on Wi-Fi, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. That's my thing. Next up, we have Wish here saying, hard agree on the backs take, which my take, I forgot to read it, but my take was that backs is, very mid and overrated. My take, while definitely not scorching hot, is the more restrictions and or predictability added to the Terra mechanic and draft, the better. Be it Terra preview, restricted number of types, etc. So I think this is a little too broad, right? Because if you restrict the mechanic too much, at that point, get rid of it. Just get rid of it, in my opinion, right? There's absolutely no reason to have it if you're restricting it too much. And that's kind of why I've been leaning away from the 2 Terra types, Terra preview, only on Tuesdays type shit. But I do love Terra preview. That is by far my preferred mode of Terra. And if you guys didn't watch the BBR tour, or you weren't around in the Showdown team, the standard, especially in Showdown, the standard Terra rule set right now is that you declare a captain and they can Terra into any type. Now, it's banned in the more broken mons. Obviously, your Baxes can't Terra your, what do you call it? It's another broken one. Why am I blinking on broken Terra mons now when there's like 87 of them? Iron Valiant, say can't Terra, things like that. Those mons can't Terra, Roaring Moon. But, before the game, there's a little screen that pops up on Showdown, and it'll tell you the Terra type of each Pokemon. Obviously, on the Terra captain, you'll be able to see, okay, this is Terra Electric Volcarona, and I'll be able to play around it. I think the problem with Terra is not so much the builder, because I feel like as a good draft league player, you should be able to identify 5 to 6 typings that might do well against you and kind of have pathings and ideas for all of them, right? And some of them are going to overlap, right? But the way I play around those is going to be much different. The way I play around a Terra Electric and Terra Water Volk is going to be much different. and I need to be able to make that distinction in game and have just one 50-50. Is it going to Terra or not Terra? I know what type it's going to Terra into, but is it going to Terra or not Terra? Where it becomes finicky, is it going to not Terra? Is it going to Terra electric? Is it going to Terra flying? Is it going to Terra ground? Is it going to Terra fairy? Is it going to... That's when it becomes too much for me. And that's why I very much so prefer the free Terra preview, because I feel like it rewards good building and it rewards solid play. And I think most people have kind of come to that agreement. Next up, we have Liv here saying, when you get to the point in a draft meta where genuine solutions to top picks, such as a great example of this, or is almost a formulaic set of the nearly objective first 16 picks in most leagues and tours, you've defeated the point of playing draft to begin with. To elaborate, draft's entire purpose is to showcase Pokemon in a more creative way than ladder typically can, by encouraging the use of Pokemon across a wide array of value, and when the format becomes standardized, again, see Swiss Draft, it's counterintuitive to the point of playing. I get what she's saying. She's saying, like, when a metagame becomes so solved, I keep seeing the L5 tweet, it keeps making me laugh. It's going to be in the thumbnail for sure. I keep seeing, I get the idea of, like, if a metagame becomes too standardized and it feels solved, it becomes boring. But my issue with this argument, it's kind of like what I was saying with Kelly, is I feel like it is greatly over-exaggerated, right? Because there always is a top 16 objective best picks, right? There is. Now, there's a little bit of subjectivity to which one you think is better, but for the most part, if you have 16 people in draft, there are 20 people. There are 20 people that you can draft with, obviously. Or there's like 20 mons that are probably going to intermix in and out of those guys, but those are your top mons. Nothing is going to change that. What changes in draft and what makes it interesting is the addition of those lower tiers and building a team, building a cohesive team, a cohesive core, and things like that. Even your mid-tier Pokemon, even like your tier 2 level mons, like your Zapdos, Galar type guys, you're going to be able to kind of mix and match and make more interesting builds, interesting teams to stop those top tier threats, because that's just how Pokemon's going to work. The top tier, the best Pokemon are going to be more centralizing. They're going to the metagame's going to gravitate around them. So I don't agree there. I think it's okay if there's like a top 15, 16, 20 Pokemon that are pretty much always drafted top, because it's literally always going to be that way. I think people over-exaggerate with Swish in saying that, because Usum was definitely like that. Oras is definitely like that. Oras is still being played now in 2023, but the metagame has obviously been out for like the last like 8-9 years. It's been pretty much solved at this point. People who know how to play Oras know how to play Oras. And those top 16 mons, you're not gonna, unless you're Amol, you're not gonna see a round 1 pick 3 Infernape or something like that. Like, it's just not gonna happen. So, yeah, I think it's important to note. Like, I think I understand what you're saying, but I think it's very greatly over-exaggerated. Next we have Astra here saying Zapdos is the best draft league Pokemon of all time. I remember his response was Dragapult II. It's a little bit of a hot take. I don't know about that one. I was talking with Amel actually when I saw this one, because it was one of the first replies. My bad. It was one of the first replies, and I think Zapdos wins the award for most annoying draft league Pokemon ever. You can't switch in on it. It's just obnoxious. The electric flying stab combo is crazy now that it has Hurricane. And static is the most obnoxious ability in the game. There's nothing more infuriating than getting static paired. And I will die on that hill. There's nothing more annoying than that. It is absolutely infuriating. But then next up we have L5. Booster energy is turning the frogs gay. That's what the woke Silphco media doesn't want you to know. Is that the booster energy is turning the frogs gay. So this is a hot take for most, but not for me. I know L5. Don't you worry. I'll keep on preaching the good word. Then we have Shaman here, the Hawaii Shaman, saying, number 1, Iron Valiant without Terra is an incredibly mid Pokemon. The way he worded this, he forgot the incredibly, and it's incredible. So at first I was going to say, like, it's an incredible Pokemon, then there's just a mid slapped in. So I'm going to assume he's saying it's a mid, which I do agree. That's one of my hot takes. Maybe I should have put that. I don't think Iron Valiant without Terra is like a top 5 mon. Really. I think it's very mediocre once you start looking at it in the calcs and you start looking at it in practice and play. It really struggles to pick up the KOs you need it to without Terra. Like, it really struggles with it. I think there's much better Pokemon that you can objectively grab all the time. Number 2, a tier system is much better than a system with points due to the amount of power creep in Generation 9. I do not agree. I think we are much past the point where we use tiers at this point. The issue with tiers is the pricing isn't dynamic enough, right? And back in Gen 7, say, like, when most leagues were doing tiers, or at least most leagues I was playing when we were doing tiers, because I wasn't playing in, you know, super high upper echelon leagues at the time. The issue with tiers is there was a lot of Pokemon that were lumped together that weren't really equivalent in price, but were being treated as so, right? So a great example is, let's say, Infernape. In Generation 7, and maybe Generation 6, again, I wasn't there, so I can't really speak to attest to this. There's always a massive debate whether it was Infernape was a tier 1 Pokemon or Infernape was a tier 2 Pokemon. And no matter where you have it, it adds some funkiness, right? Because you get it in tier 1, you have probably the worst tier 1, right? It is not a good Pokemon. It's not worth drafting in tier 1 because that's the same tier that you're drafting Tapu Koko and Celesteela out of. You're spending the same amount of points on a Tapu Koko and Celesteela as you are on an Infernape. But then you get down to tier 2 and you're like, man, is this Pokemon like objectively better than everything else? That doesn't seem fair. So that is where like the 13, 14 points come in like, you know, a points-based draft, obviously. Again, and you can say the same thing about so many Pokemon. Like, again, Thundurus I and T are in the same point category as Tapu Koko. That doesn't seem equivalent, and you can't like dynamically price things well enough. So that's why tiers don't work. That's why tiers aren't the objective best way to do it. Gen 8 Ninetales pre-DLC was peak draft league. Why pre-DLC? The same shit. They added like a couple bonds, I guess. Isn't it like the same shit? I feel like they didn't have that much. Did any mons get crazy buffed in DLC? Maybe it's just the Urshifu's? Maybe Shaman hates the Urshifu's. I mean, Ninetales and Gen 8 was a lot of fun. I played a lot of Ninetales and Gen 8, so that's fair. And number 4, Hazard Control is extremely overrated. I agree. There's a cool take by Zazo a little bit later on that I'm going to kind of wait to explain on that. But I'm sure you guys can tell that I agree because of the fact that I have no Hazard Control in GBU at all. I simply don't own any of it. I'm checking Twitter on my phone because I just got a notification on the side. I want to see if it's someone else. It's not. Okay. But yeah, I don't think Hazard Control is good. And yeah, we'll talk about it in a second. Alright, never mind. We have another thread. We have Endless here. Let's see what Endless has to say. So, Endless says, number 1, Terra is an objectively broken mechanic for Draft League, and OU can be considered in Gen 9. It needs to be removed from the equation. I agree. Fuck that. I hate that mechanic. Screw Terra. Number 2, DPP is the best draft format among Gens 1 through 5. Oh man, may I introduce you to the greatest Draft League tournament of all time, the Emerald Open, which will be having signups in March. Now, I think DPP is a lot of fun. I mean, I love DPP OU. It's definitely my favorite, like, standardized metagame. It's so much fun. I've only played one draft tournament for DPP, and I didn't do that good. I think I won, like, 1 or 2, because I got hacked on one of my pool games, and then didn't make it out, and Endless Tour. So maybe this time I'll find a little bit more fun, but I love Gen 3 drafts, so right now it's Gen 3 draft for me. At least for like old gen drafts. I've never played in a Gen 1, 2, or 5 league. Number 3, the best way to improve a draft is to mock better players for large team tours such as DPL. I think this is a fair take. I think sometimes people do this too much and think it'll help them way more than it will. But the idea basically is playing people who are better than you consistently will cause you to rise to the occasion because you will naturally have to adapt. And I do agree there. I think a big thing is making sure you're joining leagues. On top of this, and I think a better way of doing this to make it feel a little bit more rewarding, because it gets kind of boring otherwise, is join leagues where you're not the best player. Like the Showdown Upload League that I'm going to be doing here in like, what is it, January? The Showdown Upload League I'm going to be doing, I'm like a bottom 3 player in that league. I'm super gassed though. Like even if I don't make playoffs, it's a great way for me to get better and play with really solid players. And again, I think that's the most fun part about draft is, you know, playing people who are better than you and getting better and getting to the point where you're like, haha, I'll beat you this time. I got another one. We have Beazle. Okay, I'll remember to get the Beazle one. I saw your response, Beaz. Don't worry, guys. I got you. Okay. But yeah, I think you definitely just want. I think the more general premise is like play against people who are better than you. Number 4, as long as your league is run well and the players enjoy their time there, it is not an on-league, no matter what people tell you. I mean, yeah, this is totally fair. I mean, I think it's like there's a big elitist culture in draft where like, if your league has better players or, you know, whatever, it's been around longer that your league is better. And that's not true. I think the only time your league is an unleague is if it's ran shitty. And there are a lot of shitty ran leagues in the world. But, again, it's also not that big of a deal. If you think a league's ran bad, just don't play in it, you know? just put your head down and move, you know? So I think that's obviously fair. Like, who cares? Like, again, I think the most fun I ever had playing in draft was, when I first started playing, I knew nobody. I was playing in random leagues that were like, you know, keeping stats in like a random Discord chat or had like the worst docs in the world. Nobody knew what they were doing. The tiers were terrible, but it was fun. And like, that's what it should be, right? This isn't a job, you know? So I think it's fair. I've actually had this very distinct urge to make a burner Discord account and play like a random small one-off league and just never tell anybody, or make a YouTube video about it and say I snuck into a draft league. So maybe it's a YouTuber brain to me and I wouldn't be able to do it. And then we have, if you put best in your league's name, it's the best league. Source, trust me, bro. A little plug for the BPL, the best Pokemon league. I see it. Okay, look, we got down there pretty quick. Alright, next up is Zeke with a couple. First one is my hot take is that Pokémon OGalbina should do a 1v1 draft streamer vid. Streets would go crazy. That would be a good time. Streets would go crazy if Streets are being me, because that would be hella fun. I'd be super down. And then we have Zeke here. Shouts to Zeke. I appreciate him. I appreciate them. But then we have Zeke saying, banning hidden power from Nat Dex leagues is always the wrong call in my eyes and is really lame that it's now the standard. I get it. Like, so there's two sides to the argument, right? One is that it's like a very arbitrary thing to ban like one cut move and not the other ones. But also, what is draft? What is Nat Dex leagues? It's arbitrary rules, and people don't like playing with hidden power. People don't like playing with it. It's just, people don't like it. I don't like hidden power, so they ban it because they don't like it. And I think that's kind of like where you're like, okay, do you want to be completely like strict to what these rules would be, or do you want to be a little bit more arbitrary? And especially in like a Nat Dex setting, I don't know. And draft in general, it's completely arbitrary rules and movesets. You're making up your own format, so making up your own rules doesn't seem too bad to me. I don't know. I guess so. I also gotta make sure the coffee doesn't get cold. And then his next one is going to be draft team names and logos have become entirely obsolete for non-upload leagues and is honestly more of a nuisance for doc work than it is fun to have. I mean, this is kind of fair, but I also think it's fun to like have your team, even if it's just like a shitty, stupid name, like the Poggers Goldangos, and it's just a Goldango going like this. Like, it doesn't really hurt anything, right? And it's fun to have your own team name, and you're like, I coach the Miami Mets, I coach the Carolina Roaring Moon, I coach the Golden State War Turtles. I think that's fun, so I don't think it's too bad. Next up is Soul Blaze here, and this was definitely a hot one. If you run a draft league, you should let everyone who applies play. They took time to show interest in your project. You make it work from them. 17-man brackets, odd pools, buys, whatever you need to do. You as a tournament organizer should not decide how many people get to play. I think it's a really bad take. Like, respectfully. As someone who is running a league right now, right? I have 95 applications with a month left. You want me to make divisions for 100 plus people just so everybody gets to play? And especially considering a third of those people who applied probably aren't going to be very dedicated. They're probably going to drop, and that's fine if they do. But if I let everybody play, I don't have any backups. I'm stretched super thin because I'm running a crazy amount. Like, say if you have 12 people apt for your 8-man league and you expand it to 12, dude, that makes sense. But like, I think this is a very like narrow like view set to like say this. I don't know. I don't think that's true at all, because there's literally no way I am ever going to allow everybody in the league. Again, I have 4 divisions. We're capping it. It's going to be 16 per div, 4 divs, and that's it. You can stay around, be a replacement, and you're active and I see you working and someone drops, I'll get you the spot. But I am not required as a tournament owner to let you play. And as an organizer, I do get to decide how many people play because I am organizing the event. You also get to decide. You can decide if you want to allow everybody, but I get to decide, not the people who app. That's why I'm running it, right? Like, I don't know. Then we have A12 here saying Mega Man Electric is greater than Raikou. I mean, I think it's kind of fair. Especially in the generations where both of these Pokemon are allowed, like in Hidden Power generations. Mega Man is good. They both can struggle with grounds at times, but the difference between Mega Man and Raikou is Mega Man is faster, Mega Man has better ability, Mega Man also can hit grass types with like Overheat and Flamethrower, which I think is very valuable that Raikou can't. It also gives it a neutral click into a lot of mons. Whereas I think Raikou is actually pretty bad. Unless you're playing ADV draft, Raikou is pretty bad, so I actually agree with this one. I don't think it's that crazy. I'm surprised he didn't say something about Darius Beers then. And then we have Burning here saying you're spot on with your non-Terra backstake. It goes from a top 3 mod in the format with Open Terra to a very niche round 3-4 mod best, in my opinion. Yeah, I think that's exactly what I said. And then as for my own take, no clue how hot this is. Zama's into both forms are in no way balanced enough to be legal in the standard Gen 9 format. Yes, true, preach. I know Zama Crowned was allowed in some leagues in Gen 8, and then it got nerfed this gen, and its stats, and ability only procs once. Oh no. But the issue is that it got body press. If it did not have body press, it would not be broken. It would be very allowable and very mediocre. But the move body press makes that Pokemon broken. It does. It just does. I've used it myself. I have been watching Amel use it in the Trio store that we're playing. I've been watching Keegan use it in the Trio store that he was also playing in. It is a broken Pokemon. Simply, objectively. It is just broken. So, I agree. And then Zombie Hero, if your league plays in that, don't play in the league. Okay, next up, we have Ethan here saying, every gimmick after Megas has been awful and has directly contributed to the degree of power creep we've seen in the past few games. Yeah. I think less so with Z-moves. I think people kind of shit on Z-moves for no reason. I like Z-moves. You know, I don't think they're that bad. But I definitely agree with D-Max obviously being the worst when it comes to singles. And then Terra is genuinely awful as well. So I mean, I agree. And again, even just past Gen Mons, like becoming infinitely better with the idea of Terraing. I mean, it's a running joke that I'll have with my friends, but you can make any 2-point shitter Pokemon a Terramon, and it's immediately a top 3 mon on your team. Because you can change your type at will. You can just change your type at will whenever you want. So I agree. Next up, we have Basher saying, people think Iron Bundle is a fraud. People who think Iron Bundle is a fraud, but that's because they're using it as a water type and not an ice type. I guess what he's saying here is, like, if you're putting yourselves in positions to spam Hydro Pump and you're missing, it's because you're putting yourselves in position to spam Hydro Pump, or really you should be clicking Ice Beam and Freeze Dry. I do agree. I think when you have to click Hydro, you're in a tough spot, whereas clicking Ice Beam and Freeze Dry is much better. My big thing is I do think that Terra Bundle is infinitely better because of the fact that it can Terra Water, and those Hydro Pumps are crazy strong, those Terra Blasts are strong, and then it has the Ice moves to supplement. So I still think it's very mid, but I do agree, like using it to spam Hydro Pump is going to put you in tough spots. So yeah, that's fair. Oh, we have another Lando I take. I guess I could have waited on the Oba one, right? We have Marcus here saying Lando I is equal to or worse than Lando T. Its sets aren't as varied, depends on life orb damage, but it can use other items. It feels frailer, it doesn't break like it can on paper. Lando T is versatile and strong. You can see Lando I at often 18, Lando T is 16, and that just ain't right. So I agree with part of this. Lando I is overpriced. Lando T is not underpriced, though, in my opinion. Again, if Lando still had Knockoff and Toxic and Defog and Rock Polish, for sure, 18-point mon, especially with Terra, the mon will be a demon. But it's still a great role player, great, centerpiece to a team and kind of facilitator for the rest of your team. But Lando really often lost that win potential too, just like Lando I did. But I do think that Lando T is just about as good. And I think people shit on Lando T too much this generation because of the losses. I still think it's incredible. It's just obviously not as good. Then we have Zaza here saying, hazard control is more of a testament to a lack of... Here, let me pull this up. Hazard control is more of a testament of a lack of skill. If it was a supercomputer, in order to maximize every turn / gaining every turn, a computer would evaluate doing something every turn while evening to live hazards once or twice, switching is more optimal than removing. And removal is more so to simplify the game because it's easier to evaluate with no hazards up, further sequences, and not necessarily about the pinnacle of optimal. Okay, it is not the pinnacle of optimal. Okay, I missed the and I was like, wait a minute. So basically it's saying that, if I'm reading this correctly, it's saying that, setting or removing hazards and drafting a bunch of defog and rapid spin isn't as necessary as people think, and often can kind of lose you momentum and things like that. Forcing your opponent to defog and lose a turn, forcing your opponent to try and rapid spin and lose a turn is very rough. It loses you momentum. It saps from your pace of play, and it can kind of put tempo in your opponent's favor. And I agree. As someone who does not draft hazard removal very often, I might get one or two, and it's really because of the other things they offer. Then I have the option of hazard removal. But again, in GBU, I'm at this point? What's my record? 5-1, something like that. I have one loss. And to be fair, one of them was against a Hazard Stack team, but it wasn't even Hazards that beat me, right? And I felt completely comfortable. On the Mons I don't want to take Hazards, I'll put Boots on them if I can afford to do so, or I'll just understand how I need to play with Pokemon with Hazards up. I build a team that, understands, how I need to play with hazards up. So I think this is fair. I really think removal is overrated, especially when a lot of the removal is so mediocre. A lot of the defoggers lose to all the rockers, and there's not a lot of good spin this gen. There really is not a lot of good spin. Really, it's like the Donphan trio. That's it. Other than that, I can't really think of great spinners. So, yeah. Next up, we have, is it Guile or is it Gil? Saying Zygarde 50 is overrated. It's good in Forces Prep, but it's significantly better on paper than it is in practice. There's a lot of people who think Zygarde's overrated. Me personally, I think it's great. I love Zygarde. It's one of my favorite Pokemon ever. Very excited for it to come back, and I hope people allow it to Terra for 1 week, and then I draft it, and then they're like, wait, no, and then I have it for a full season. Because Zygarde with Terra sounds crazy. But I think it's incredible. Losing Toxic is going to be really rough for it, so we'll see how it looks this generation when it comes back. But Subtoxic Zygarde is one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. I think it's incredible. I love him. Then we have Kristoff here, aka Kanto Chris, I think. Yeah, Kanto Chris. People saying people that drop out of draft leagues for minor reasons, no fun, don't like my team anymore, should be banned from participating in any draft league ever again. Mate, you knew exactly what a draft league is and how long a draft league season goes on. You can't tell me you don't have 2 hours a week to build a fun team. I'll go even farther. You tell me you don't have 15 minutes to build a fun team. It takes you 2 hours to build a team for a casual league. You have lost the plot, my friend. It should not take you that long. I'll tell you that right now. It should not take you that long. So, I mean, I agree. If you make a commitment, you should keep it. Now, of course, if life circumstances come up and major things happen in your life and you need to get out, dude, for sure. But if it's just because you don't want to play anymore because you're doing shitty or because you don't like your team, that's annoying. That's obnoxious, and you shouldn't do that. Don't play in the league. Right? You make a commitment, you should keep it unless unforeseen circumstances really do come up. And if that's the case, then of course they do. And you can't ever like accuse someone of like dropping for unfair reasons. If they're like, hey, X is happening in my life, I need to drop, or this is happening, I got a new job opportunity, things like that, for sure. But like, if it's just because I don't like it, probably dumb. Next up, we have Benny here saying American draft leagues have way too many broken mons to allowed to consider for me to consider seriously playing in one. This is interesting, dude, because so I'm pretty sure Benny is German, and there's like, I've talked about this in my videos before because I have a lot of German viewers. There's like a whole separate community. There's like the German draft league community, and there's like the everything else draft league community, and they're very different. Not that one is better than the other or one is wrong, but I have noticed the bans are a lot more like tight and stringent in German leagues, which has always been very baffling, and things are like regarded or like tiered differently, and like things are valued differently. They still use tiers a lot from what I've seen, so it's very interesting to see how these two separate metagames have kind of evolved based on the same thing. And I think it's fair. I mean, I think it's totally fine to have, two separate things, and again, different viewpoints and things like that. I mean, you also have small, quote unquote American draft leagues that'll ban Cresselia because Cresselia is annoying and I don't like it because they don't know how to click on or something like that. So yeah, I think it's just more so interesting. I think it's a little much to be like, I would never consider seriously playing in one when they allow XX and X and things like that. So like, relax. But it is interesting. It is definitely interesting. Next up, we have Braden here saying Roaring Moon is absolute garbage in the draft. It's place 30 pick. Okay. I love my boy, right? I love Roaring Moon. Now, non-Terra Moon is very mediocre in draft. I do agree. Especially pre-DLC. However, with Nock, I have seen it perform much better lately. I watched a game on stream last night of, I think it was Jay Scarf, just like absolutely cleaving through a team with Scarf, Nock, Moon, and I thought it was banded with how much damage he was doing with Nock. Like, it was killing it. Everything, dude. Insanely strong Pokemon. So it was really cool. I really want to try it without Terra now that it has access to Nock. I think people struggle with Moon when they force into the like DD WinCon role when it's not Terra. When it is Terra, dude, force into the DD and WinCon role. It's supposed to do that, right? But when it's not Terra, people really force into that DD WinCon role, and I feel like it's not great at it when it can't Terra. It can either boost a stab or change into a different typing, get that stab aggro, get rid of some of its resistances and things like that. So yeah, I definitely think that it's better now. I don't think it's absolute garbage, but I would say it's very mid. And we'll see how it continues to, show upward trends, things like that. Next up, we have Soulblaze here saying, low-tier Terra is not a healthy way to balance the mechanic. Some top-tier Terra bans are fine, but low-tier Terra is restricting big chunks out until it feels fine, which means the entire format becomes a complete customized guesswork disguised as standard. Also, too many Ubers. I don't know what the also too many Ubers stands for. I don't like when people are like, this Pokemon is Uber, so it should not be in Draft League. They're two different formats, bro. I guess Spothra is very mid for a reason. Like, it's pretty terrible. I think someone later on is like, yo, Terra is terrible. Or Spothra is terrible, right? Or Palafin is, very much so beatable when it can't Terra. Like, there's a lot of things like that, right? So I don't think, like, the Uber argument is there. I do agree that I don't like low-tier Terra, and the way I put it is, yeah, as long as you... Now, again, this is considering you're banning a lot of the broken top tiers from tearing, but if we do that, right, and we make sure nothing objectively broken can tear at the top tier, you have your top tier mons, your 2 or 3 mons that are considered like, high tier Pokemon. They're very good, right? And that's fine. But then you add in low tier Terra. And Terra is such a centralizing and strong mechanic that instead of just having those 2 or 3 top tiers that you've already drafted, right? Now you have a Pokemon that costed 8 points originally, but now it can Terra, and it is as good as your 15, 16, 17 point Pokemon. It just is, if you're drafting a good Terra Captain. So I think it actually adds more stress in the builder, more stress in the battle, because there's more broken things that you're dealing with because you're making your low tier Pokemon absolutely souped up to the maximum. So I don't like low tier Terra personally. That's my main thing. But the too many Uber things, I don't know about that. Then we have Basher saying Terra all Jolteon is better than Terra all Regieleki. If you're looking at it from value perspective, I think that's fair. But also not really. I don't know. Terra Jolteon is still really good as like a low tier Terramon. It's obviously going to cost way less than Regieleki. But like if you just like get both of them for free and you get to pick one, probably picking a Lecky to be completely honest. So it depends on how you look at it, right? Now we have another one from Zazo here saying the early game generally creates more of a widening advantage comparable to both the mid and end game combined. This is fair. I think this is basically saying like the early game matters so much, especially in this generation. I feel like it's been pretty crazy. Whereas if you fall behind major early in the game, you just lose, right? Like if you lose that 1 or 2 mons earlier than you're supposed to, the game is over. Whereas a small mistake in the mid game, a small blunder or a misposition in the mid game, as long as the game is still close, you're probably fine and can still pull it back. It might put you in a worse spot, obviously, but like if you do that really early on, it feels like you're just screwed. It feels like you're absolutely just screwed. Then we have Benny here again. Really doesn't like the American draft leagues. Really does not like them. But it looks like he's going to say, I also don't like an American draft leagues that for a lot of leagues, the public Google Doc is hard to find and people don't put it in the description. So trying to follow him becomes very annoying. I think this is more so like a YouTube, right? Which is fair. I mean, the main thing is like, I know SPL has been doing a very good job with their fan doc and things like that, but I think the main thing is to realize is that like American YouTube leagues, especially for last like generation, they're small leagues, right? They're full of small creators who do this for fun on the side, so they're not as professional or as on top of keeping up a fan document, right? Because there's not that many fans, to be completely honest, especially in Generation 8, and they can't show you the real doc because the real doc is up to date, right? And what I mean by that is YouTube leagues, if you don't know, they play a week ahead of time. So like they play they're ahead a week when they upload their week 1. So when week 1's being uploaded, they're playing week 2, right? And week 2's about to end. If that makes any sense. So you can't share the actual doc because it spoils the results. So you have to keep a whole separate document, and depending on your league size, maybe you don't see it as a reason to like really keep one because it might not be a ton, they might not be super worth. Let's see, how much more do we have? Oh my god, still so much. Okay. Start going through them a little faster. Next up, we have Keegan here saying every Pokemon in the builder starts with heavy-duty boots unless it needs a strong justification to have a different item. This is a base take. That is the best item in the game. And I'm surprised nobody said it. Maybe my hot take should have been that I put in the thing. Heavy-duty boots are a necessity because hazards are over-centralizing, not boots. If heavy-duty boots did not exist in Generation 9, me and Keegan were talking about this when he put this in the thread. Me and Keegan were talking about it. If heavy-duty boots did not exist in this gen, it wouldn't be playable. It wouldn't be playable. The removal's so bad. Again, removing, as we talked about earlier, is also kind of slow. It's maddening. It's terrible. Like this Beazle tweet. To where I think that the game would be like legit unplayable if boots didn't exist. So yeah. And we have another really juice take, and we should bring back restarts. No, we shouldn't. Shut up. Eat your crit, be mad about it, but we are not restarting. Keegan's referring to back in the day, a lot of times it was like almost like a gentleman's agreement. Like if you hack someone super early on in the game, you'd be like, hey man, you want to restart? And then people restart. Fuck no, you just got crit, deal with it. Like I am not doing that, and I don't expect anybody to do that for me, Alright, next up we have Nishoba here saying, please remove Terra and ban all of the top tier. Reduce format, remove the top 30 to 40 mods, and it's clearly the best format available. Gen 9 is way many. Okay, you had me, then you lost me. Remove Terra, for sure. Banning 30 to 40 Pokemon? Just play low tier. Just play low tier. Just play low tier with no Terra. What are you doing? That's not standard draft anymore. 30 to 40 best mods, you're going back to like Gen 3's levels of power creep. That's a lot of Pokemon, dude. No. And you'll still have over-centralizing top tier Pokemon no matter where you're at in the metagame. You take off the top 30 to 40, those top mods that are left over are going to fill the same vacuum and void. It's a bad way of looking at it. But yeah, remove Terra. She sucks. Okay, next up we have Chef here. He said, I don't know how hot of a take this is, but I think Spectre is bad without a team that can make to function without it. I mean, it's not a super hot take. It's just kind of how Spectre functions. It really only functions on very specific teams. Like, I think my WPF team, despite me not using Spec very well, was a very good example of it in the fact that, like, it was very much so built around getting passive chip, hazards, and damage to where Spec could come in and be obnoxious and terrifying and, really solid in that way. So, I mean, I think that's just kind of how Spectre works. So, I don't know if it's a super hot take, but I definitely think there's probably people who don't do that, so that's fair. Then we have Caden here saying, I don't care how inaccurate it is, I'm always going to run Hurricane over any alternative. If I miss, I'm just bad. True. And they got this new, like, caramel syrup to put in a coffee, and it is super fire. Like salted caramel. Oh my god, I love caramel syrup. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I don't run Bleak Wind a lot now that I've noticed. When I've been using Torn, a lot of times Hurricane is just better. It gives you a lot, like the difference in base power is pretty immense, and both moves are inaccurate, right? So I think this mostly like applies to Torn. I'm running Bleak Wind most of the time, if that's the case, to be completely honest. So, or I'm running Hurricane over Bleak Wind. So I agree. Beazle, and I haven't read this one because it literally just got posted 22 minutes ago while we were recording. But I'd be the goat if I wasn't lazy. True. Okay, but for a serious take, I feel like Draft Leagues is Genford focus on letting more things Terra than they do. The league I run lets everything Terra, although they only have one Terra type and can use a free to change it, and it works surprisingly. So everything on a team can Terra, but they only have one type they can Terra into. Again, that seems very convoluted. I would be interested to see how it goes. I would try it out, but I still do feel like that one Terra Captain and Terra Preview is just objectively the best way of going about it. Then we have Celeste here saying Terra's just straight up unhealthy and unbalanced for the format anyway. It can be implemented. Does that mean it can't be fun? No. But if you're convincing me you aren't convincing me it's an actually balanced mechanic, and I think that's what it comes down to. Terra can be fun, right? Say in Terra, I pull off a crazy Terra Chimecho sweep. Frostmouth got 20 kills for me. That's fun for me. Is it balanced? No. I agree. So I think this is a great way of putting it. Terra can be fun, but it's not balanced for a counter team format. Next, we have Joel here saying Enamorous Incarnate is overhyped and usually overvalued in every draft league I've ever been in. It's good at what it does and when it's needed, but when I drafted, it was very hard for me to make it fit on a team and only brought it a few times. I think that might just be you, bro. Enamorous is incredible. It's probably one of my favorite mons I've used this gen. Now, granted, I was able to Terra on it, but I mean, even without that, its dual stat, or its coverage combination and its stat spread is so incredible. It's very versatile as well, whether it be physical or special. You have cool tech options like Healing Wish as well to heal up your team. Dude, I think Enamorous is insane. So I don't know if I agree. I love it. Next up, we have Jiggy Poo here. He's saying, also, if you allow Omni Terra, even if it's only on a specific mon, this shit is unbearable to prep for and play against. Terra's a dog shit mechanic overall. Again, I agree with this, but if you're allowing Terra, I think that Terra Preview and Omni Terra is the best way of doing it. I think Terra Preview is what you have to do if it can Omni Terra into any typing. But I think in the builder, that's not that bad. I think in the builder, as long as you are a semi-confident builder, you'll be fine in that regard. Next up, we have Lolo here saying Blissey and Chansey are the most lucid draft leagues ever. They're just set up fodder and nothing else. Yeah, I agree. They suck. Those mons are terrible. I mean, Kaz is going to kill me if he ever watches. Thank God he won't. But I really hate Blissey and Chansey. I've drafted Chansey once. It came to one game, did what it needed to in that game. I think it was check a Kyurem because I lost a Specs Kyurem otherwise. But even then, I could have lost a Kyurem with my Chansey if he was the right set. So yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I'm not a big Blissey and Chansey guy. They're very passive, very exploitable. But yeah, I know other people like it a lot, so I'll see. Next up, we have Six Infused saying Mega Psych Plow is way better than people ever tier, so say it's worth. I think it's better than people say it is. I don't think it is over tiered or under tiered though. I think it is good because of its price tag, and I do think that higher level players will tell you that Mega Sceptile is a very good anti-low tier Mega. It's very, very solid. It's speed tier, it's typing, it's immunity. Very obnoxious. I remember I played in the sports circuit tour one time back in Generation 8, which was a circuit you made if you did good in a certain amount of leagues and things like that and gained a certain amount of points. And I forget who it was that had that. I want to say it was Rye, who's a very good player. I want to say it was Rye. But he had a Mega Sceptile in our game, and it was terrifying. I did not deal with it well at all. It's a really, really solid Pokemon. So yeah, I think it's definitely really good. I don't think it's over tiered though. I think part of the reason this is very good is because of where it's tiered. If you put Mega Sceptile any higher, it's not going to get drafted. It's not worth it. Next, we have Jack here saying Keytron sucks. That's wrong. That's wrong. Next. That's wrong. Next, we have Dylan John here saying Substitute is the best move in draft league and is a good way to eliminate unwanted 50-50s, especially in a game when you have no need for other coverage. It's the best mid ground in the game. This is a cool take. Sub is very solid, and again, I think it's cool to frame it this way, right? Because immediately I'd be like, okay, sub is good because I can, get it behind a sub on a force switch out and, able to do a lot of damage. But eliminating the 50-50 is really solid, especially in a Terra metagame. If you're trying to scout and see if a mon is going to Terra to resist your move, you can sub and kind of deal with it accordingly, or at least force another 50-50 and kind of get an insight into your opponent's mindset and things like that. And again, if you think someone should switch, you sub behind. And if you're wrong, it's better than clicking a predicted flamethrower and getting blown up by whatever move it used to stay in and things like that. And you're like, oh my god, I can't believe you did that. It at least gives you the option to kind of get in your opponent's mindset and things like that. So I think that's fair. I think it's definitely one of the better moves in the game. I think Encore is still the best move in the game, though. Then we have Anthony here saying, Sun teams are its best in Gen 9 leagues, and leagues should prioritize increasing the price of Torkoal and maybe Ninetales and Sun Sweepers. It's definitely the best Sun there's ever been, but I've never been in a league where I'm like, Torkoal is too cheap, you know, or, you know, these Sun Sweepers aren't cheap. And again, I don't even think Sun Sweepers are good. Like, fucking Scovillain sucks. I drafted it recently. That mon's terrible. Like, there's not good Chlorophyll mons. There's good Sun Sweepers in the sense of, like, Proto mons, and that is why Sun is good now. It's not because of Sun Sweepers. It's because of the Proto mons. Now, when Venusaur comes back, maybe we'll see something different. But yeah, I definitely think that Sun is definitely at its best this generation. I don't know about increasing the price of it, though. Don't think it's that bad. And we have Radioactive Mayo saying, a good draft league team doesn't always need the standard Firewater Grass Core or Fairy Dragon Steel Core that people talk about. A good draft league team should have synergy outside just have matchups. I mean, yeah, I think this is like one of the biggest traps when it comes to newer draft league players or smaller communities, in the sense that, like, when you start playing, you hear a lot of like YouTubers, especially back in Gen 7, talking about Fire, Water, Grass, Dragon, Fairy, Steel, Fast Electric type, bulky water, things like that, where it becomes really restrictive in your building. You'll actually end up having really shitty drafts a lot of the time if you're drafting for typings. What you should be drafting for, at least when you're thinking defensively, is resistances and immunities. If I have a Buzzwole, I probably don't need a grass type to resist ground, right? And it's that kind of idea. Like, do I cover my bases against these typings all? If so, I don't need to draft and force on a random fire type. Fire is actually like the big one that, like, you do not need at all. You'll often, and same thing with dragon, you'll often need a fairy, steel, and a water pretty often because those typings are so good defensively and they resist so many things, so it'll just end up working that way that you'll have it. But yeah. Next up, we have Lux here saying, from what I've seen in multiple leagues I'm in, Darkrai is the most overrated mon people still claim it's broken. I think that's true. I mean, if you look in GBU this season, it has been performing well, but like nothing crazy, like at all. It's not like demolishing the league, and I don't know how it's been doing in UNPL, but I definitely do not think Darkrai is broken. I think if your league allows Shampoo, it needs to allow Darkrai because Shampoo is better, like objectively better. So yeah. Next up, we have Ace Jake here saying, Miss Magius is the most underrated Pokemon in draft. I wholeheartedly believe it's the best load point Terra catching because of offensive defensive capabilities it has. With great coverage paired with Terra Blast and great utility options, under prep people can get caught off guard. Yeah, I mean, Miss Magius is great. Great speeds here, very strong, solid super def, good utility, and with Terra, it's obviously going to be much better. So I agree. Good stuff. I think like Terra Fairy, Terra Electric are both great typings for it. So yeah, for sure. Next up, we have Didi here saying, in leagues that allow, for example, 9 to 11 mons, not getting the max amount of mons is shooting yourself in the foot. I don't care how top heavy you want to draft, not hitting the mon limit is shooting yourself in the foot. So many mons for less than 3 points can add to a draft. I don't agree. I think this is cap. I really do not agree. There are definitely low tier value mons, but if you're spending your points correctly and you're grabbing the app rolls, I'd much rather have solid, reliable Pokemon at the top tiers performing multiple roles than having a shitty Chimecho being my ground resist. I know we kind of hyped up Chimecho earlier, but like that was the first one I could think of, right? And it's not that Chimecho can't get value, but if that's my ground check, I'm going to have a tough time. If that's my Levitate Mon or my ground immunity, I'm gonna have a bad time. So I don't agree at all in this. I think top heavy is actually more often than not better as long as you're drafting well top heavy wise. You're not just drafting cool Pokemon. Next up, we have Jiggy Poo again saying single elimination and best of one playoffs is a bad format. Really feel like the actual best play season ends up winning the playoffs. Usually, whatever team gets the luckiest with matchups. I understand why it's like that in a lot of leagues. I don't know what the solution is, but it still sucks. I mean, I get the idea, right? Is like it kind of eliminates hacks from the scenario in some instances, but I don't get the matchups comment because if a team has an aggressively well matchup against someone, they're probably going to win a best of 3 anyways, especially if you can't really change the team. Maybe if you can change the team and become different, I really don't think so. I really don't think so. It also doesn't make sense if like on Wi-Fi, but like on Showdown, I really don't think it makes too much of a difference, and it's a pretty big time commitment for that. I think like with one team only, best of 3 is a bit redundant, so I'm not super big on that. And Pokemon's just a luck-based game too. Like I think playing it, you have to realize that sometimes someone's gonna cheese their way through and have a Mickey run and win the championship because they got lucky in a couple games. But that's Mons. I mean, I'm sure you can look at every like undefeated team in the league. They probably had a couple games where they got extremely lucky and it helped them win. that's Pokemon. You know what I mean? Like that is just how it goes, unfortunately. And if you don't like it, we just gotta play a different game. Yeah, I don't know. Next up, we have Luke in here saying a Goldengo is comparatively bad in draft. It is not worth more than 13 to 14 points. It's only worth if you want Hazard Stack. Otherwise, mediocre what it does. I think Goldengo can be overrated at times. At least early gen, it felt very overrated. But I don't agree here. I don't think it's just like the anti-hazard stack mon, which it is great at. But that typing is incredible. Ghost Steel is great. Solid speed tier, solid coverage. It can T-Wave things. It has reliable recovery. It gets nasty plot. Like, it's really good. Goldengo is incredible defensively and offensively. So I don't think I agree. Next up, we have another Terra take. Pokemon is way more fun without Terra. You can barely draft a low tier without feeling the need of Terra and get its full value. I mean, yeah, I think Terra sucks. I think Terra sucks. Next up, we have Bronze in here saying base 100 speed is far too slow in the Gen 9 metagame. Mons like Chi-Yu are not fast enough to break in a very fast priority field meta. I do think that base 100 is slow. I don't think that Chi-Yu can't break. I think that that's kind of like asking a little bit too much of a breaker. When I think breaker, I want something that comes in and hits fucking hard, right? It finds you a position to get on something slower or more passive, something that it forces out, and it kicks a button, dude. And that's a breaker. Like, Nidoking has base 85 speed, but Nidoking's a good breaker. Nidoking would be a great breaker in this generation because you can naturally live one hit, which you can do a lot of the time as well. Keep in mind, it's not like the frailest thing in the world. The rock's weakness is bad, but you get in, you either take a hit, nuke something, or you nuke something on the switch-in. You don't have switch-ins. So that's what I think a breaker is. I think base 100 speed is very slow in this metagame, though. I think Chi-Yu does really struggle in that regard. Even as a Scarfer, it'll likely not outspeed a lot of things that are also running Scarf and things like that. So, yeah. Next up, we have Tyler here saying Chien-Pao is better than Darkrai. I just said that a minute ago. I agree. I super agree, and I think like the fact that people are allowing Pao and saying Darkrai is broken, we should reflect inwards. Next up is JK saying Terra preview should be normalized in SV draft. It is in Showdown. It's not on Wi-Fi, but Wi-Fi always does kind of their own different thing to Showdown. It's just different player base and different thoughts and things like that. So I hope eventually, if Terra stays, that it moves to that, but we'll see. Wi-Fi is very, very set in their ways with Terra and how we've been doing it. As someone who plays in the community, there's a lot of people who are very, very hardcore against anything free Terra, anything Terra preview. We do the 1 to 2 typings and that's it. Whereas I think that's going to kind of hold the Wi-Fi community back a little bit, but that's another personal take. Then we have Wolves Nation here saying Encore is a top 5 move specific for the draft league, especially in this meta where offense is much stronger than defense. It's one of the few ways to punish setup. Yeah, it punishes setup, but it also punishes passive play, wishes and protects and things like that. Like, you punish setup, but you also punish a ton of other things. Or you can use it to get in on a Pokemon that's clicking a resist to move into you and say it has another coverage move against you, but you can Encore lock it into the move that you take no damage from. Like, that's a really valuable thing. Or you can Encore lock a Pokemon into an attack that knocks you out, but does not deal with your setup Pokemon in the back, and you get that free turn because you're immune or resist. Like, Encore is by far the best move in the game. I think that it is crazy. Like, it's such a good move if you're using it correctly, especially on faster mods. And we have Idra here saying Darkrai is not that OP. I agree. Alright, we have 3 more. Look at that. We got here in just an hour. Next we have Clevin11 here saying no Terra Spother is a terrible bot mon that will never be a good player unless you build your team around it, and even then you gotta hope your opponent doesn't play your prep around it well. Chicken is worse than a Spother no diff. Or than Espeon no diff. I agree. We just kind of talked about it earlier. The Spother is very, very bad. It's not very good. Very, very bad, not good. With Terra, it's a lot more overwhelming, I think, but without Terra, I think it's very mediocre. Personally. With Terra, though, it's very solid. Then we have Solar Sandal here saying offensive spikers are significantly more valuable than bulky spikers. Scrod is the best spiker in the game, barring Hisui and Samurai. I mean, yeah, I think it's just a product of this generation being more offensive. Like, slower passive Pokemon aren't going to do very well in such an offensive metagame. So, obviously, I think offensive spikers are going to be great ones that force switches. So, yeah. And then we have Jay here saying Quackleval is a shit mon that only works in lower divisions. I think that this is a little much when it comes to describing Quack. Like, yeah, Quack is definitely better in lower divs. It's like a noob killer mon, snowball mon that, wins games. But to say Quack is bad in higher skill leagues and higher div leagues, I think is a little facetious and not super true. I still think it's very, very good. It's just much better in lower skill divs. Like much, much better in lower skill divs. So, I don't know. That's what I think. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I think this was a really fun thread. I mean, it only took me an hour to get through this one. I read pretty fast, so obviously I wasn't as in-depth as I probably was in the first video, but I mean, look at how many freaking responses we got here. Holy moly. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know if you agree with the takes that we saw. Let me know if you disagree with the takes that we saw. Again, be respectful, and let me know your Draft League hot takes. And yeah, hopefully in 2024, we also have a really fun Draft League hot takes thread. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Later.